Good morning, Dr. Helaine Marshall. Thank you for being with us on this interview on flipped learning for education superheroes. Dr. Helaine is the Professor of Education and the Director of Language Education Programs at Long Island University Hudson. Thank you for your time and thank you for being here.
Sure, happy to be here.
So we're going to be talking about flipped learning this morning, and Dr. Helaine has been flipping classes for a long time. So Doctor, could you tell us a little bit about when you started flipping lessons and what the main challenges were at that point?
Okay, so what happened was at our university, we had annual retreats for technology, and the faculty would disappear for 3 days and we'd learn all different techniques and tools for implementing instructional technology. And I'd been going to them for several years. And that particular year, which was, I believe, 2010, there was a presentation called On the Bleeding Edge, instead of the cutting edge. And they would always give us the very latest of what was happening. And someone mentioned flipped learning, flipped classroom. And they told us about it. It was about like a 10-minute. But I knew right then, I said, that's for me, that's what I want. I'm going to try it. And I tried it in the class that I was having the most difficulty with, which was linguistics, which I call chemistry for language. Offering explicit instruction and then taking them through the homework that they couldn't do. And it was a very negative vibe in the class. And time was a problem. And I never got through the whole semester the way I needed to in terms of the curriculum. So I thought I would try it. And this was a face-to-face class, in-person class, and I tried it in 2011 was the first time. And it was, I don't usually get, miracles in my language, but it was almost like a miracle. What happened was I recorded, and then I was just starting, so I recorded myself doing the lecture, basically. That was my first. And I just did a lecture. Just like I would do it in class. I did have some guide questions on the side that they were supposed to pay attention to. And they watched the videos. And in fact, some of them said they watched them with a friend or someone else. They watched them together. And I tried to put some funny things in there and make it entertaining. And then when they came to class, I would do what used to be the problems for homework. I did them in class, but I had them work on them in groups and I would circulate. And what I found was that with the support of me and their classmates, they could do the work much better, and I wasn't spending class time delivering the lectures. So it was a very traditional flip, totally traditional. And I did that for a couple of years, but I also was teaching online separately. So I had online classes, but my online classes, I was delivering lectures in the Synchronous classroom and giving them assignments. I was teaching the traditional way, not flipping at all, in my online instruction. So I had these two separate things going. And it never, well, not it never occurred to me, eventually it did occur to me, that I could take the flipping and the online and put them together. Like a recipe. And so, so I started to do that in 2016, I started to do. Actually, 2013, I tried a little bit, but it wasn't the true model that I have today until 2016. These things take time. I mean, people think, oh, SOFLA, you just sat down one day and there it is. And no, it took years and semesters and different kinds of courses and a lot of experimenting, and in fact, I have a little formula that I use, PPRR. You need those four. The first is persistence. Don't give up. If you want to do this, you'll find a way to do it. The second is patience. You have to be kind to yourself and your students. Be patient. It doesn't happen overnight. And then those are the two P's. And the two R's, you have to reflect. You have to reflect along the way and give yourself a chance to step back. Maybe you write, maybe you talk, but you do something to think things through a little bit. And then the last is renewal. You renew yourself. You come back after the reflection with a revised version, a kind of a rethought version of what you're doing. And so I followed those 4 recommendations without necessarily consciously doing so, till I perfected. It's not perfect, I shouldn't say perfected, but I got to the point where I said, this is it, this is the model, I'm fine. And that's when I first published it on the Flip Learning Global Initiative blog, the organization that John Bergman has online. I was one of the research fellows. And so because I was a research fellow and I was working on SOFLA, I published first there on the blog in 2017. So that's the first iteration. And I do present some data from my classes. I collected a lot of data. That was the other thing. I asked the students a lot of questions. I made them fill out questionnaires all semester, and I wanted to know what was going on. And I was amazed. Actually, they figured out that they liked learning by these videos that I prepared. And I did by then. By 2016, 17, I'd started putting questions in and getting the data, first with Zaption, then with PlayPosit. And I was able to collect the data. And then that gave me what I needed to plan the subsequent classes that I had with them. So that's kind of a long way around to answer your question about the challenges that I faced and how I developed, how I started flipping and developed SOFLA.
Yeah, so talking about SOFLA, and you talked about the model with PPRR and being patient and persistent. I think this is a very unique situation for teachers around the world, where many of them have been pushed into online learning environments and hybrid classrooms without much opportunity for preparation or without a chance to be persistent or patient. So it's almost an overnight shift. So what do you think about this situation? Do you think that it could provide opportunities for teachers to grow, or are these challenges too much for the teachers to deal with?
Well, we all have our own context. And so what I speak about is what's happening here. I'm in the US, and I'm in a particular place in the US, the East Coast, and I can't really speak on global terms, but all of the teachers that are around me are panicking. I have no other word for what's happening to them. They're completely overwhelmed. And I try to tell them, look, it took me years to get to where I am, and here you're being asked to do it right away. And the way I explain it to them is I refer to schema theory, which is that, you know, when you have to learn a new schema, that's not like incrementally learning a few more techniques or something like. You have to completely pivot yourself. And these are teachers who've already been to school, they already know how to teach, they've got their degrees, they're done, leave them alone. They've got their subject matter, they've got their techniques, they know what they're doing. And all of a sudden you take the rug, we say, take the rug out from under them, and they lose their balance. And that's not good for the kids or the students, if it's adults, even in college, any students get upended too. So they've got a learning curve. So I really think it's overwhelming for teachers. So I do a lot of coaching and helping of teachers. And what I do is for each person, I mean, if I have a whole group, sometimes I have a whole group and I kind of work with them, you know, in a larger professional development capacity. But when I do the individual coaching, I try to find out what that person's style of teaching is. And I pick the tools and the techniques within the framework of SOFLA that will work for that person so that their shift to the new schema is minimized, so it isn't so traumatic for them. Yeah. And I've done all kinds of strange things for people that couldn't make the adjustment. In fact, there was one professor, I just have to tell you this story. This one professor who all he could do was send emails and talk on his phone. So what he would do is he would call me up. I would get my phone right next to the mic on my computer. He would call me on the phone and he would do his lecture. I would record it on my computer, on the audio. I'd end up with an audio file. I would upload the audio file to the platform, which I had designed for him. He couldn't do anything like that. But the
Yeah.
students, could access the lecture
Yeah.
and, the questions and all. So I'm ready to meet people wherever they are.
Yeah.
And I think that's important. And I think administrators of programs ought to realize that there are many, many ways to implement teaching when you can't be in person. And it doesn't have to be fancy schmancy like all the things that maybe you and I do because we're so interested in technology. Yeah. Many of the teachers, they're not even interested in it. They don't want to get good at it. They just want it to be
exactly.
over. We just have to get them through a speed bump is their idea. So I think that's important to understand and to be very, very flexible. What's important are the design principles and the fact that these are competent instructors. They're not any less competent because this happened to them. And we've got to keep that. And they need us. It's so funny because I was the weird lady down the hall on campus. What does she do? She does that weird online flippy thing. And now it's like, knock, knock, knock. Can I talk to you?
How do you do this?
What do you do?
Yeah, exactly.
And then they realize what I do is impossible for them. Not that I'm just saying that fact is that it's not going to happen. And for most of them, every now and then I get someone that really embraces it, but I think we have to let them be themselves and just help them and guide them. That's kind of the way I view it.
I completely agree. I think online teaching was new for me when the pandemic hit. I'm the kind of teacher who goes in and has really energetic warmer for my kids and get them on their feet, get them moving around. And then suddenly when I had to teach on Zoom, I didn't know what to do with them, especially for that first bit. And then it took a lot of research and finding different tools and, recording sessions, etc., to get back on my feet. So there is a transition phase. And I think the biggest problem today is most of these teachers are going through this transition phase without much support and probably without any support in some cases. So that leads me to the next question. I've heard from a couple of teachers that, when you think about online pedagogy and online teaching, they have a mental block coming in because they think they're not good with the education tools and the education technology, and that stops them from even trying to venture into this space. So what do you have to say to teachers who are inhibited by technology?
I think what's important to realize, and I have to credit David Rosen for this idea. He's an adult educator in here in the U.S. out of Boston, and he runs an instructional technology list. And there are many people who read and contribute, and I'm one of them. And he posted something I thought was very, very helpful about the concept of change and how you adapt to something new. And what he said was that it's good if teachers can look for equivalencies, like you were talking about that warm-up section. What's equivalent to that? Do you have to throw it out, or is there something that's equivalent? It might be a little new for you, but the activity can be the same. It's just going to be done differently. Okay. My example is a pocket chart. I don't actually physically have a pocket chart, but I can make it digitally. I can find a way to move little pieces around on a screen instead of on a physical pocket chart to show question formation, word order. I'm TESOL. So
me too.
that's equivalent. So he says, first you have your equivalencies. So there will be some, you don't throw it all out. Secondly, there are going to be limitations. There are things that you're not going to be able to do, either because technologically they're not within the parameters you have, or because the particular pedagogical technique can't be implemented digitally. It's true. I mean, everything can't transfer. Okay, so there's that. But then there are also advantages. And so it's important to find that there are some things that work better. The example I always give is, how when you're teaching in person, if there's a side conversation and two students are talking, it's distracting, and you tell them, no, stop that, But online, if like right now you and I are in Zoom, there's a chat, and people could be in here and they could be chatting in the chat, even whether it's privately or to everyone, and it doesn't disturb the audio of what's going on in the room the way a conversation in an in-person class. So in a way, that's kind of an advantage because you can have this running conversation while you're teaching. So that's just one example. And then the fourth, those were his three. And then I added a fourth one to it, which is innovation. Because I think sometimes you can do something that no one ever thought of before because we're doing online and flipping. There are things that you couldn't do in a regular classroom. So, you know, that's another way. And one of the things I do for that is in my classes, not in all of them, but in some of my classes, I do peer instruction where I think we've talked about this in another session.
Yes.
What I have them do is they prepare a video lesson that they deliver in class in real time, and they pause their video and students respond, and it's happening all in our synchronous session. And then they give a quiz, which is a poll right there in the room, and that whole little encapsulated lesson gets recorded. So we have it forever, and we have their lesson. We can then go back, because I'm a teacher educator, we can all go back and we can watch how the lesson went. It's just phenomenal. And, you know, it's something I never did before, and now I do it. And, you know, so I think that's what we have to focus on. Not can you do this tool, that tool, or how complicated it is. The other thing is to pick tools that are not complicated and that give a lot of benefit. So I think it's really important to have a tool. One of the things that I think I work with teachers on is shared reading. One of the issues is that students don't do the pre-work, they don't do the reading, they don't prepare for class. And teachers just say give up. They say, I have to teach them in class because there's no other way to do this. And I do suggest that they have a tool for that. But there are tools out there. The best one I know is Perusall, Perusall, if you're watching this, Perusall, because the students are together reading the same copy of the book or the article or whatever it is. And that's not that hard a tool for someone to learn. You just put your reading materials in there, and the students read it, they highlight, they comment, and you can put in questions. I think it's a simple, straightforward tool. There are a lot of complicated features to it, but you don't need to use those features, you know? So that's an example.
This is something that I'm definitely going to try out, the synchronous online flip learning approach. I really haven't given much thought to it. It's probably happened organically in some of my lessons, but to try it out as an approach is something that I'm really excited about.
Yeah, you know what's interesting when you say that you've probably been doing a lot of it. That's what I find is that if you're teaching online, you sort of gravitate into some of these steps of SOFLA, even if you're not thinking about I'm doing this, and then that's what happened to me. I didn't realize that I had a model with 8 steps. I just developed the way of teaching. And then I realized that it was more helpful to people if I made it explicit. And that's when I stopped just saying, oh, I have this thing, I call it SOFLA. They said, well, how do I do it? And I said, well, I don't know, just watch my class. But then I realized I've got to really explain it. So that's when I said, there are 8 steps, here we go. Because I looked at what I was doing and I said, oh, that'll be step 1, I'll call that step 2. And that's kind of how I did it. And then when I had the 8 steps, which I'm sure you have available in a graphic somewhere or whatever. And then I realized it's actually a cycle. So it's a cycle, and the pre-work is the first step, which has to go well. And there are guardrails to make sure that it does go well built into the model. And then they go around the cycle and then back to the pre-work. So I think it is important to have structure to what you're doing. And that's what I think the benefit of SOFLA is. It gives people structure so they know what they're doing. And even if they skip a step or they can't do a step, at least they know that there's a structure to it. You know, there's a way there's a pathway to follow.
Thank you, Dr. Helaine, and thank you for your time, and thank you for doing this interview with Education Superheroes.
I appreciate it. It was fun.
Thank you.